Chapter 40 Occult Course. Interesting technique? Klein asked very curiously. Old Neil hey say with smile. I'm going to inspect the weapons, materials, and literature library. You make 2 cups of coffee with 2 cups on the table and put something bad in one of them. What is it? You can make up your own mind and use your imagination. The only requirement is that you can't waste too much coffee powder. That's my own hand grinding with coffee beans from the plateau. Okay. Klein didn't quite understand what old Neil wanted to do, but he agreed happily, watching each other take out the copper key, open the iron gate of the arsenal, and hear the long footsteps echoing inside. He leisurely set the cup and confirmed that there was hot water in the pot. Remove the lid of the silver tin jar. Klein shook a spoonful of coffee powder with a metallic spoon into 2 cups, then poured hot water and stirred it. As a traveler from a material-rich era, he is no stranger to coffee. After all this, Klein thought for a moment, sat down, cocked his right leg, wrung some dirt from the soles of his boots by hand, and put it in the cup on the left. Then he carefully stirred again until there was almost no difference between the 2 cups of coffee in appearance, color, and fragrance. After a few minutes, old Neil shook his keychain and walked out of the armory, slamming the iron gate. It's done. His slightly turbid dark red eyes turned and looked at Klein across the table. All right. Klein nodded to answer. Old Neil smiled, untied the silver chain wrapped around his wrist, and sat down. His expression soon became calm, and his left hand held out the chain so that the silver chain hung vertically over the coffee cup on his right side. The pure white crystal was almost contaminated with liquid. In a relaxing peace, the white crystal inexplicably swung slightly and started a small counterclockwise operation with a silver chain. This cup will not let go of bad things, old Neil said in a positive tone. Before Klein confirmed, he put away the silver chain and picked up the cup of coffee next to him and took a sip of it. Do you like to drink bitter coffee? I am used to a spoonful of sugar and a spoonful of milk. Klein didn't answer and asked with interest. Your divination result is very accurate. Is to rely on the white crystal? Is it white crystal? This is the pendulum method in divination, also called pendulum method, which relies on the connection between spirit body and the spiritual world and the starry sky, and uses some natural materials and spiritual communication, such as crystals, precious stones, and special metals, to predict the quality of things. Let's go back to those 2 cups of coffee just now. Swinging counterclockwise is bad, clockwise is good, and immobility is not good or bad. You can also write the event on paper. Note that it is an event, not a problem. Old Neil put down his coffee cup and explained it in detailed Klein as if thinking way. That is, don't use interrogative sentences. Yes, you can't use who is willing to be my fiancé. You should use who is willing to be my fiancé. Write it on paper, put it flat on the table, and then hold the pendulum chain with a non-dominant hand. Note that it is a non-dominant hand. Old Neil laughed. At this time, straighten your arm, adjust the length of the pendulum chain so that the crystal hangs just above the paper and almost touches the event we wrote. Then close your eyes and meditate on that passage for 7 times. After meditation, open your eyes to see if the pendulum rotates. If it doesn't, close it again and repeat the previous process until it swings. Klein nods slightly. No counterclockwise, yes clockwise? It can also be interpreted as not smooth and smooth. Old Neil corrected it and taught Klein other usage and details of pendulum divination. Klein recalled it several times and found that it was a very practical divination skill. For example, when you are in a strange environment, you can use it to quickly confirm whether food is poisonous or not, and you don't need additional skills such as point and field biology. Of course, this form of divination is too simple and only 2 or 3 answers can be obtained, so it is impossible to carry out in-depth exploration and interpretation. For example, although some things are harmful to themselves, they can become very beneficial after certain treatment. For example, some ingredients are really harmful to the human body, but they are not serious. In the case of starvation, eating them is actually not too big a problem. These cannot be judged by the pendulum method. I have to save money to buy crystal or sterling silver to make the pendulum as soon as possible. Klein sighed aloud. Old Neil gave him a surprised look. You can apply directly. This belongs to the extraordinary, especially the standard equipment of our kind of auxiliary extraordinary. There is also a topaz and a sterling silver pendulum in the arsenal. But I'm not a full member of the team. Klein slammed his heart and hesitated slightly. Old Neil chuckled. For extraordinary people, whether they are full members or not, since they don't raise their salaries, they must be given some convenience from other aspects. It may be more appropriate to use welfare. I will apply to the captain later. Klein secretly clenched his fist and made a decision, without a try. How can we know whether the captain agrees? Okay. Old Neil smiled and said, we started the formal course of mystery. One of its foundations is called symbol. Do you know what symbol is? Klein recalled the words he had heard before and what he had seen and heard in the spirit world and above the fog, and considered and said, no matter the spiritual world, the illusory starry sky, and those unknown fields, they are all outside our sensory world. The information obtained by ears, nose, and eyes cannot be accurately described. We can only get unspeakable intuitive enlightenment and experience, which are manifested as abstract symbols and graphic symbols. These symbols represent different things and different meanings respectively. Very accurate. It is worthy of being a soothsayer. Old Neil nodded gravely. Only by mastering the ability to interpret symbols can we truly enter the door of mysticism. Well, the pattern on the tarot card and every element in the pattern are all symbols, artificially prescribed symbols to help us understand and interpret the original revelation. He took out a piece of paper, picked up the pen next to him, and drew a short arc. Then he brushed a few vertical lines below the arc and looked up at Klein's way. Do you know what this symbol stands for? Klein looked and hesitated for a while and said, Eyelashes? Old Neil spat out a sigh. This is the symbol of the Harvest constellation, this is the Thunder constellation, and this is the Frost constellation. He drew several symbols at random. Klein memory, while can't help it said, the names of these constellations are really, really simple. Yes, simple. It's so rural and primitive. Old Neil smiled way. At the beginning, Emperor Roselle thought so. He always planned to change the name of the constellation to Virgo, Cancer, and Scorpio. Unfortunately, he still failed to resist the traditional power. At least the ancient names of these constellations and the dates they represent can guide farming and harvest. I have to say that Roselle the Great is a man of ideas. Klein doesn't know how to complain. Well, Russell the Great was supposed to be a decent man. Old Neil couldn't understand Klein's humor and went on to explain various basic symbols, such as those of various constellations, such as the sun, the red moon, the brown star, the red star, and the blue star. When talking about this, he interspersed with teaching the drawing method and matters needing attention of the divination astrolabe, the making of the crystal ball, and the choice of materials, and mantras, which made Klein almost feel dizzying. If he hadn't found that the soothsayer magic potion had slightly improved his memory, he would have stopped Old Neil for his own digestion. Today's mystery course is here. Think for yourself and come to me if you have any questions. Old Neil took out a gold pocket watch and snapped it open. Don't forget to read the historical materials I prepared for you. Frankly speaking, I feel scared when I see them. Okay. Klein took the signed drafts written by Old Neil and first ran through the mysterious knowledge he learned today to avoid obvious forgetting. Old Neil took a sip of his coffee again. Memorization alone is not enough, so you must use it often so that you can turn knowledge into your instinct. Also, meditation must be carried out every day. Only by practicing and using it more can you really master the power of the potion, dig out its hidden mystery, and eliminate its bad influence. When it comes to this, Klein thinks of acting, of the divination club, and tries to say, my potions are related to divination. It is not enough to practice by one person. I have to contact with a large number of people and give them divination respectively so that I can master them as soon as possible. I'm going to join the divination club, the one on Hull Street in the North District, and be a real diviner when I have extra money. This matter will certainly be hidden from the night watchman in the future, so it is better to pave the way in advance. Your idea is very similar to that of Daly. She has always said that she wants to be a real psychic. Old Neil shook his head and smiled. But why wait until there is extra money? You can write an application to Dunn and ask him to approve the fee. Organizations such as the Divination Club may have members mixed with cults and evil organizations. As a civilian of the Night Watchman Squad and a standard extraordinary person, it is necessary for you to join them and monitor them conveniently. We used to inspect these places regularly, but it was difficult to track them for a long time because of insufficient manpower. Now it is just for you. Can you even do that? Looking at Old Neil's serious expression, Klein was shocked. This is a fair and square way to find a reason to reimburse your private affairs. I know absolutely nothing about such things. I really just a keyboard strong. Do you want to do this with your own money? Old Neil said, smiling, and added. Klein immediately shook his head and answered firmly, I'll call the captain later. Old Neil's satisfaction and looked at the eye has not been poured out. There are bad things that cup of coffee. What on earth did you put in it? Klein smiled shyly. It's just a little sludge on the soles of leather boots. It's almost the same color as your coffee powder. Old Neil, dazed, suddenly put his hand against his mouth. Low voice shouted, Don't take it away. Chapter 41. Audrey and her Susie. After pouring coffee, he went back to the armory and took a thick stack of historical materials and draft explanations compiled by Old Neil. Klein turned to the ladder leading to Blackthorn Security Company along the gas lamps on the wall. Duh. Footsteps echoed in the sealed and empty underground. Klein walked through the spiral stairs, pushed open the door, made a little identification, and went straight to the second office opposite. After 2 days of familiarity, he has roughly figured out the layout of Blackthorn Security Company. The first entrance is a spacious reception hall with a group of sofas and tables and chairs, which is the inner area through partition. The 3 rooms on the left side of the corridor belong to Mrs. Ariana's accounting room, a lounge with several sofa beds and a staircase leading to the underground, The three rooms on the right are, from near to far, the office of Captain Dunsmith, the office of civil servants equipped with typewriters, and the recreation room of formal members of a night watchman team. Klein had seen Leonard Mitchell playing cards with two other team members in the recreation room before. He guessed that it was Fighting the Landlord. Of course, Emperor Russell had renamed it Fighting Evil, but the gameplay was no different from what Klein knew. Brett will have a day's sleep benefit after the night shift. Luo Shan stays at the reception desk, and Sizzle Francis, who is responsible for purchasing and applying for materials and working as a part-time coachman, goes out as usual. When Klein pushes open the door of the civilian office, all three tables in it are empty, and the purely mechanical typewriter is quietly placed. Atkinson's 1346 typewriter? Klein, who had seen similar items in the tutor's office and Welch's home, whispered, only feeling that the looming complex control system was full of mechanical beauty. He went to the desk with a typewriter and sat down. He brewed for a while and tried virtual typing that at first he always instinctively processed it into pinyin. When he was familiar with it, he digested the corresponding memento mori of the original owner and made no mistakes. The rhythmic keyboard tapping sounds like a hard piece of music from metal and industry. Accompanied by this melody, Klein quickly completed the application documents, but he didn't rush to find Dunsmith. Instead, he calmed down and carefully read the historical materials provided by Old Neil, which was both a review and a study. Near noon, he moved his neck and put away his materials. According to the draft of Mystery Course, he recalled and consolidated what he had learned in the morning. Until this time, he took the application form and came to the office next door, gently knocking on the door. Dunn is waiting for the delivery of lunch. After seeing the file handed by Klein, the corners of his mouth slightly become warped. Old Neil taught you that? Klein didn't hesitate to betray Old Neil. Dunn picked up the dark red pen, brushed it, and signed it. I just want to apply to the church and the county police department for funds in July, August, and September. I'll include yours, and I'll ask Mrs. Ariana to withdraw it when it's approved. Lingbai can get it in the afternoon. Okay. Klein replied succinctly and forcefully. His tone and eyes were obviously pleased. Before leaving, he casually asked one. Shouldn't the funds for July, August, and September be applied for in June? How can I apply for funds in July again? Dunn was silent for a few seconds, took a sip of his coffee cup, and said, I met 3 cases in a row in June, so busy that some things were forgotten. Not the Kuei is a captain with poor memory. Klein knew he had asked the wrong question, gave a quick laugh, and hurried out. In this way, he began a simple and regular life, with half an hour of meditation in the morning, 2 hours of occult lessons in the morning, and 1.5 hours of mastering historical materials. After lunch, he took a nap in the lounge to regain his energy, then get the bullets and go to the shooting club to practice. After the practice, take a walk to Welch's residence, which is not far away, change the route and walk back to Iron Cross Street so as to save a bus fare. If you have spare time, you can master Second Sight, Pendulum, and other skills and buy a dish, by the way, a private chemistry laboratory with complete instruments and articles, tall, blonde, and supple. Audrey stared at the cup in her hand and saw countless bubbles coming out, which made the atmosphere quiet. Eventually, the liquid in the cup precipitated into a thick silvery white. Haha, I really have a gift for occultism, and I succeeded once. I was worried about failure before and prepared 2 materials. The girl said to herself with joy. She collected all kinds of surplus materials from the family treasure house and exchanged with others, took a deep breath, and prepared to close her eyes and drink the audience potion. Just then, there was a cry of woof woof outside the laboratory, and Audrey frowned. She put the silvery white cup in a dark corner, turned around and walked to the door. Susie, who's here? Audrey turned the handle and asked the big golden retriever dog sitting at the door. Susie, the golden retriever, wagged her tail and looked pleased, while the maid, appeared in the nearby corridor. Audrey walked out of the lab, backhand Wu door, look at Anne's way. Not said? Don't bother me when I'm doing a chemical experiment. Anne replied distressfully. But there's an invitation from the Duchess, from Lady Della. The wife of Duke Negan? Audrey took a few steps forward, close to Anne's way. Yes, she invited Ms. Weiwei, the court baker, and invited her to have afternoon tea with you. Annie said the contents of the invitation, Audrey's slightly invisible drum under the cheekway. Tell my mother that I'm dizzy. Maybe the sun is too strong and I'm a little dehydrated, and ask her to say sorry to Mrs. Della for me. While speaking, she made a weak appearance. Miss, this is not only afternoon tea, but also a literary salon. And added, but it won't cure my dizziness. I need a rest. Audrey firmly refused. At the same time, she silently said to herself, if I insist, I will faint for you to see. The etiquette teacher said that I did this perfectly. What sound did I hear? All right.
And spat.
Do you want me to help you back to your room? No, I'll clean up the lab first. Audrey couldn't wait to return immediately and take the magic medicine, but she held her temper and watched Annie go away, and then she just visible walked back to the door of the laboratory. Suddenly, she found that Susie, the big golden-haired dog who should have stayed outside, was gone, and the door of the laboratory was half open. I forgot that Susie will open the door with a handle. What's that noise? Not good. Audrey heard the ringing noise from inside, and suddenly, she had an association and rushed into the laboratory. All she could see was the broken cup, the last drop of silvery white liquid licked by Susie, the golden retriever dog. Audrey stood at the door like a statue. Susie, the golden retriever, immediately sat up, looked at her master with innocent eyes and wagged her tail. Off the coast of Pulitzer Harbor, an island that is always shrouded in storms, an ancient sailboat stopped at the harbor. With soft yellow hair, wearing a lightning-patterned robe, man looked at the other side of the Alger Wilson, very puzzled, and said, "Alger, you can completely return to the kingdom and become the captain of the penalty squad or a decent bishop. Why did you choose to go to sea and become the captain of the Avengers of the Dark Blue?" Alger's rough and profound face has no extra expression, and he solemnly replied, "The sea belongs to the storm. This is the kingdom of the Lord. I am willing to follow the will of the Lord and patrol this country for him." "All right." The blonde man holds the boxing chest and says, "The storm is with you. The storm is with you." Alger responded with standard courtesy. He stood on the deck with few crew members, watching his companions leave the ghost ship and go further and further. "Signs, you don't understand because you don't know enough," Alger whispered quietly. At the same time, Audrey completed the second modulation with trepidation. Looking at the silvery white magic potion that is no different from before, she was moved and almost shed tears. Phew. She sipped and quickly drank the spectator potion. On Friday, a rainstorm hit Tingen, and the rushing rain beat on all the windows. In Blackthorn Security Company, Klein, Luo, Sean, and Brett are sitting on the sofa in the reception hall, enjoying lunch on the table, because there is only a stove for boiling water and leftovers can't be heated. Klein can't eat brown bread every day or go back by bus, so he has to consider returning by bus after walking from Iron Cross Street to Welch's residence in the afternoon, which is a great waste of money. So he has to follow Luo, Sean, and other colleagues to eat the so-called office meals. The nearby Oldville restaurant will send a waiter to come here on time at 10:30 every day to ask how many people here need lunch. After determining the number of copies, they will deliver them at 12:30 noon, put them in containers similar to lunch boxes, and then come back at 3 p.m. to ask if they want to order dinner and recycle tableware. This kind of food includes meat, vegetables, and bread. Although the weight is not much, it can barely make a person full, ranging from 7 pence to 10 pence. With different grades, Klein has the cheek to choose a 7 pence one at a time, which usually consists of half a pound of oatmeal bread, a small piece of meat made in different ways, a spoonful of thick soup with vegetables, and a little cream or butter. There is only one night watchman today. Luo Shan sent the thick soup into his mouth with a spoon. "I heard that there was a case in Wudong district with sectarian elements, so the police department invited 2 night watchmen in the past." Brett put down the bread. Klein dipped the remaining oatmeal bread into the last gravy and stuffed it into his mouth without speaking. Inside the cuff of his left hand, there is a silver chain hanging with topaz. Just then, there was a knocking sound from the half-open door. "Please come in." Luo Shan paused, put away the spoon, quickly wiped her mouth with a handkerchief, got up and said. The door was pushed open, and in came a man with a half-top hat and a black suit, whose left shoulder was wet. His temples were gray, his umbrella was put away by hand, and he looked at Klein and others. "This is the former mercenary squad?" "You can say that." Luo Shan familiar answered. The tall and thin man coughed a track. "I have a task I want to entrust." Chapter 42 The Housekeeper Carve. "I want to entrust a task. I'm afraid you have found the wrong place. The brand of this security company is really just a brand." Hearing the words of the newcomers, Klein suddenly choked up a full cavity, only wishing that there were no forums and barrage to communicate with. However, he quickly thought that he had asked something similar, and the captain's answer was, "If you are free, why not answer it? The money earned can be used as the team's small treasury and the welfare of the participants." Luo Shan eyes turn, think for a moment. "Our security personnel are all out of the task, and the fastest one will be back at least an hour later. If your business is not urgent, you can consider it." Among the 6 full members of the Night Watchman, Captain Dunsmith was invited to the church by the bishop. "I don't know what to discuss, but Leonard Mitchell is guarding the Chinese gate for him. That Fry, the body receiver, and Luo Yao Lading, the sleepless, have gone to Jinwatong district to cooperate with the police department in investigating a theft case with sectarian elements. Another sleepless, Cohen Lee White, took a break, and another midnight poet, Siga Tiong, went to the Raphael Cemetery on the outskirts of the northern district for a daily inspection. The remaining 2 extraordinary people, Old Neil, are old and weak, and haven't been on a mission for a long time. Klein is still a beginner and all aspects are really amateurs. None of them are here." The tall and thin man with gray sideburns and an umbrella turned dark took off his hat and bowed down. "Excuse me, please leave." He turned around, walked to the door, and left 36 Zotland Street along the stairs in the sound of rushing rain and whistling wind. "It's really unfortunate." Luo Shan watched the gentleman leave just now and sighed regretfully. Although she won't get the commission, she will definitely share a big meal. No way, Cheney's gate must be guarded at all times. Klein contentedly put down his knife and fork and spoon. Even though he didn't like the thick soup mix with turnips and vegetables, he drank it clean. "Don't you want Brett to go on a mission? Or yourself?" Luo Shan eyes, laughing, and said, "Brett can't, but you can, our soothsayer, sir." Before the words were finished, she suddenly woke up and quickly shut up, because the door had not been closed at this time. If someone passing by or visiting outside heard about the extraordinary, it would be a leak. Fortunately, the captain is not here. Luo Shan looked at the door and spat out his tongue secretly. Otherwise, he will have to repent again. Brett and Klein laughed at the same time, looked after each other, and began to clear the table. After all this was done, Klein, who didn't bring an umbrella, chose to stay in the Blackthorn Security Company. He took a newspaper, sat down on the soft and elastic sofa, and took a leisurely lunch break. The empty boat route from Backlander to Dixie Bay was opened. Detective Munson is a book, which will be published soon. Lawglass Weapons Store advertising? 1 standard revolver with 6 bullets, 3 pounds and 10 solars, and 2 pounds of a double-barrel shotgun. Klein leafed through the honest newspaper of Tianjin City and suddenly found a piece of news. The criminals who killed Mr. Welch and Ms. Naya have all been arrested. I believe that the panic atmosphere spreading in the North District, the Golden Wudong District, and the East District will be greatly alleviated. Mr. McGovern, Welch's father and banker, escorted the body of his youngest son and returned to Constant City, and a grand funeral will be held soon. Read it several times. Klein suddenly let out a sigh. It seems that Welch's father has believed the police story and has not invited another private detective to investigate. He lost his youngest son. Certainly not as sad as my father and mother lost their only son. In a low mood, Klein sat there for a long time without movement as for Welch and Naya's funeral. He was not surprised or depressed at all to wait until everything calms down, and then find a chance to present a bunch of flowers to their graves. Klein was going to take a nap in the lounge when the door of the reception hall was suddenly knocked again. "Please come in." Head bit by bit, Luo Shan suddenly awake. The door left unlocked was pushed open, and the tall and thin man in a formal suit and gray sideburns came in again. "Can I wait here for a while?" "Your mercenaries, no. Security personnel should be back soon?" He tried to hide his anxious expression and asked sincerely. "Yes. Please sit there for a while." Luo Shan pointed to the sofa next to it. Klein was asked curiously, "Where did you hear about our security company? Who introduced you?" "So much, so that you go back and forth twice at noon in heavy rain, and are willing to wait." "Well, it must be that the members of the Night Watchman team solved the difficult tasks in others' eyes very easily and accumulated enough prestige in this business." The tall and thin man leaned his umbrella against the door, walked to the sofa, and replied with a wry smile. "I visited all the mercenaries in several nearby streets. Security companies and private detectives. Only you still have hope. They have no one to take on other tasks at all. Frankly speaking, if I hadn't met a waiter who delivered food, I really didn't think there was a security company here. It's totally different from what I thought." Klein froze. Rosen interjected and asked, "They are very busy? So many tasks?" The tall, thin man with gray sideburns sat down, sighed, and said, "You are a mercenary squad. No, a security company. You should have heard of the burglary and murder case in Halsblock." "Halsblock? Burglary and murder?" "Well, unfortunately, I am one of the parties." Klein nodded slightly with a heavy feeling. "Yes. Because of the viciousness and cruelty of criminals, the rich people in the neighborhood, and even the whole city of Tianjin, are afraid. In addition to increasing their own guards, they have invited a lot of extra security guards and private detectives, which has caused obvious vacancies in this industry." The tall and thin man replied, clearly standard chain reaction. Klein and Luo Shan glances all saw each other's self-mockery. The security industry has entered a golden age, and there is no feeling at all here, which shows how failed this company is. Of course, in a sense, it also proves the hidden success of the Night Watchman team. Waiting for more than 20 minutes, seeing that the rainstorm will stop, Klein is ready to pack up and leave, and go to the shooting club to practice the revolver. Just then, Leonard Mitchell, with dark hair and green pupils, came out of the partition and looked puzzled at the sofa position. "Who's this?" "Principal, the captain is back?" Luo Shan asked with delight. "Come back?" The tall and thin man listened. One lung, sitting here, staring at the door. "Why didn't you find someone coming back?" Luo Shan's expression suddenly froze. Busy haha laughs. "As a security company, we will not only have the front door." "I understand." The tall and thin man suddenly nodded. As for the title of captain, He's not surprised at all. The security company is the former mercenary squad or small mercenary guild, and it is quite normal to have a captain. Leonard's white shirt was not tied up, and his black vest was also casually draped. He looked at the tall and thin man and suddenly made a snap. I'm a Blackthorn security guard. What's your name? Is there anything you want to entrust? Perhaps I have heard of the mercenaries being wild, and the tall and thin man was relieved instead of being insulted. He looked at Leonard and sat down, organizing language way. My name is Kelly, and I'm the housekeeper of Mr. Wicklow, a tobacco dealer. His only son, Elliot Jr., was kidnapped this morning. We have called the police and got enough attention, but Mr. Wicklow is not at ease. I hope that through the channels of your mercenaries, security personnel, and your understanding of Tingen, we can investigate from another direction to ensure that Elliot Jr. is safely rescued. If you can find the kidnapper's hiding place, Mr. Wicklow is willing to pay £100. If you can rescue young Master Elliot successfully, he is willing to double the reward and give £200 at a time. Leonard Mitchell carefree laughed. Mr. Wicklow seems to only want us to find the kidnapper's hiding place. Otherwise, he wouldn't think that his only son was only worth £100, and the tobacco merchants with close ties to the southern plantations wouldn't only get £200. No, Mr. Wicklow is just an ordinary businessman, not a rich man, and he believes that the police department is more professional in the rescue. The old housekeeper Carrie answered frankly, okay, no problem. Leonard snapped his fingers again. His green eyes looked at Luo Shanwei. Beautiful young lady, please draw up a contract. Don't always think of yourself as a poet. In fact, you only recite other people's works. Luo Shan used to taunt Leonard and forgot that there were guests present. Of course, Blackthorn Security Company won't care about any client. It doesn't matter if it is good or not. Luo Shan left the reception desk and entered the clerk's office, and the knock of data immediately sounded. Klein's mouth twitched, only to feel that they were so unprofessional. There is no standard and ready-made contract. This is really a sad thing. What's more sad is that I am in such an unprofessional company. He was full of ideas, and Rona drew up a short contract with only a few terms, which was signed by the housekeeper Kelly and Leonard Mitchell respectively. When cleverly stamped the seal, she took the contract, entered the accounting room, and found Mrs. Ariana with the seal of Blackthorn Security Company. This seal has little effect, and Dunn usually gave it to Ariana for safekeeping. On Sundays, she gave it to Luo Shan and others, waiting for your good news. After receiving one of the contracts, the housekeeper Kelly stood up, took off his hat, and bowed. Leonard didn't respond, as if thinking about what was silent for more than 10 seconds. He suddenly turned and looked at Klein with a smile. I need your help. Klein was stuck. I mean, this task is done by me and you. Leonard explained with a slightly upturned mouth. I am good at fighting, shooting, climbing, sensing, and singing, and doing some assistance, but not looking for someone. You don't want old Neil to go out in this weather, do you? When he said induction, his voice was vague and it was impossible to hear clearly. All right. Klein has the impulse to try new skills and a little vigilance against Leonard Mitchell. Oh, I hope it can be completed smoothly. I don't know how much my soothsayer ability can play. He thought with some expectation. Chapter 43. Looking for people. Looking at Klein, Leonard blue eyes nodded with a smile. What do you need from them? He has cooperated with old Neil and others many times, and naturally understands that divination needs media, especially in the absence of the protagonist. Klein wanted to think, looked at the housekeeper carved way. I need clothes that Elliot has recently worn that haven't been starched. It would be better if he could have accessories that he used to wear with him. He tries to choose normal media, not something that will cause ordinary people to think blindly. But even so, the old housekeeper Carrie is also a face of doubt. Why? After asking, he added, I have a picture of young Master Elliot. Why? Because we have to find his whereabouts through divination. Klein didn't know how to answer at the moment. If we tell the truth and don't mention whether it will violate the confidentiality clause, most of the old housekeeper Kelly will turn his head and leave, tear up the contract directly and scold him in his heart. These liars. If this can be useful, I might as well go to the most famous psychic in Wa County, Joni Aho. Next to Leonard, Mitchell chuckled. Mr. Clary, my companion, colleague, has a strange pet. Its sense of smell is more sensitive than that of a hound, so we need clothes worn by little Elliot and his belongings to help find people. You know, clues are often only locked in a rough range. As for that photo, we also need it. He and I must know what Emilio is good at. Old housekeeper carved accepted this explanation, slowly nods. Will you wait here, or will you go with me to Mr. Wicklow's residence in the city? Go together and save time. Klein answered succinctly. He not only wants to try his extraordinary skills, but also has the simple feelings of saving others. Okay, the carriage is downstairs. Carrie, the old housekeeper, said as he took a black and white photo from his pocket and handed it to Leonard. This is a single photo of Elliot Wicklow. He is about 10 years old. His hair is a little long, which almost covers his eyes. His face has obvious freckles, and he is not very distinctive. Leonard glanced at it and handed it to Klein. Klein looked at it carefully, put the photos in his pocket, then took his cane, put on his hat, and followed the two people in front to leave Blackthorn Security Company and enter the carriage parked downstairs. The interior of this carriage is quite spacious, with a thick carpet and a small table for putting things. Klein and Leonard didn't speak because of the existence of Klee, the old housekeeper, and quietly felt the carriage moving smoothly on the waterlogged road in the decreasing raindrops. Nice coachman. I don't know how long it took. Leonard broke the silence and praised it with a smile. Klein perfunctory, old housekeeper carved, squeezed out a smile to say, "Your compliment is his pleasure, and we are coming soon." Because of fear of being detected by kidnappers, the carriage did not approach the residence of tobacco dealer Vickrol, but stopped at a nearby street. The old housekeeper Carrie walked with an umbrella and returned alone. While waiting, Leonard said to Klein again, "The last time I speculated about the reason, I didn't have any other purpose. I just wanted to tell you that the note will definitely appear again, maybe soon." This is really not a pleasant inference. Klein pointed to the position of the driver outside with his chin, indicating not to discuss sensitive topics when others are around. Leonard whistled and turned to look out of the window, only to see a drop of rain sliding through the glass, leaving a hazy mark, which completely blurred the outside world. After a while, Kelly returned with a bag of things, because she walked too fast. That this sinking was broken. "Let's go up, Klein. You and old Neil walk at the back. Be careful. You must be careful." Dunn got out of the carriage, took out a strange revolver with a long and thick barrel from his pocket, and stuffed it in his right-hand pocket. "Okay." Klein is not bold at the front. When Leonard found someone to guard the carriage, a group of 5 extraordinary people entered the stairs in an orderly manner and walked lightly to the 3rd floor. "This is it." Leonard pointed to the room opposite the kidnapper. Klein tapped the eyebrows twice and opened the second sight. In this state, his inspiration has improved again, and he only feels that the door is déjà vu, and he seems to have entered it. Yes. He must have nodded. Old Neil also opened its own second sight, after careful observation. There is no one inside, and there is no magical light. "Body," Fry huskily added. "There are no evil spirits." He can see many spirits, including evil spirits and resentful spirits, without opening the second sight. Leonard stepped forward and punched the door lock, just like yesterday. At this time, not only the surrounding boards were broken, but even the door lock snapped and landed with a thud. Klein only felt that some invisible seal disappeared instantly, and then he smelled a strong stench. Bodies, rotting bodies. The body receiver, Fry stated coldly. He showed no nausea at all. Dunn reached out and put on black gloves as right hand, and slowly pushed open the door. The first thing that caught everyone's eye was a fireplace. In the weather in early July, there was an abnormal sultry atmosphere inside. In front of the fireplace, there is a rocking chair, and an old woman in a black and white dress sits on it with her head down. Her whole person is abnormally much bigger, and her skin is dark and green, bulging until it shines. It seems that if she pokes it casually, it will burst and spit out rotten odor, while strips of maggots or parasites crawl in and out of the second sight between flesh and blood, clothes and folds. They are like light spots, surrounded by a group of extinguished dull bang, bang. The old woman's eyes fell off and fell to the ground, rolling several times, leaving several traces of yellow and brown. Klein felt queasy, unable to restrain the influence of the stench any longer, and bent down to vomit. Chapter 46 Portrait. Ouch. Ouch. Klein squatted there, vomiting uncontrollably because he didn't eat breakfast and soon vomited all the inventoried. At this time, a small tin iron square pot, which looked like a cigarette box, appeared in front of him. The mouth without the bottle stopper smells like tobacco, disinfectant, mint leaves, and so on, which makes Klein's nose choke quickly and makes the whole person feel refreshed. The strong stench still lingered around, but Klein no longer felt queasy and vomiting soon. "Stop." He walked up the tin iron square pot, saw a pale hand that didn't look like a living person, saw the sleeves of a black trench coat, and saw Fry, a corpse collector with a cold and dark temperament. "Thank you." Klein completely slowed down, propped his knees with his hands, and stood up again. Fry nodded expressionless. "Just get used to it." He stuffed the mouth of the tin pot, put it in his pocket, turned to the highly decomposed old woman's body, and started the examination directly without gloves, while Dunn Smith and Leonard Mitchell were strolling around the room, touching the desktop and newspapers from time to time. Old Neil is holding her nose, standing outside the door, head jar, voice jar, spirit to complain. "It's disgusting. I'm going to apply for a subsidy this month." Dunn looked back and touched the ash on the wall next to the fireplace with his right hand, wearing black gloves, and looked at Klein's way. "Is it familiar here?" Klein held his breath and outlined his silvery white pocket watch in his mind, which calmed his body and mind. This is in the state of second sight. He immediately had a different feeling. At present, Hor Ran flashed a picture from the deepest memory. Fireplaces, rocking chairs, tables, newspapers, nails on rusty doors, tin cans inlaid with silver. This picture is dull and dark, just like a documentary on Earth. But it is more vague and unreal. It quickly overlaps with what Klein saw in front of him, and the feeling of déjà vu seems to be obvious. The illusory and erratic screams once again penetrate the invisible barriers. Hornacchis.
Fregela.
Hornacchis.
Fregela.
Hornacchis. Fregela, a little familiar. Klein answered truthfully, and his head stung, so he had to tap the eyebrows quickly. Hornacchis. The Hornacchis mountains that appeared in the diary of the original owner. That's what I read from the notes of the Antigone family. The whispered just now is very similar to the previous one, both involving the term Hornacchis. Is this seduction? Klein was shocked and didn't dare to think deeply, fearing that he would step into the out-of-control tract. Dunn nodded slightly, walked to the front of the cupboard, suddenly stretched out his hand, and pulled open the wooden door above. Mold grew on the bread inside, and 7 or 8 gray, fluffy mice were dead next to them. Leonard, go downstairs and find the policeman on patrol and find out what's going on here. Dunn ordered the players. Okay. Leonard turned and left the house. Dunn immediately opened the doors of the 2 bedrooms and searched them carefully. When he confirmed that no clues were found, and after Antigone's family notes, Fry straightened his waist and legs and wiped his hands with a white handkerchief that he carried with him. After more than 5 days of death, there is no trauma, and there is no significant impact caused by extraordinary power. The specific reasons must wait for further examination. Did you find anything? Dunn turned to look at old Neil and Klein early from the state of second sight. 2 people shook their heads at the same time, except for a dead man. Everything is normal here. No, at first, invisible forces sealed the room. You know, when we use ritual magic, we often have similar operations. Old Neil thought for a few seconds and added. Dunn was about to speak when he suddenly looked out the door. After a few seconds, Klein and old Neil realized something and turned to look at the corner of the stairs. After a few seconds, the subtle footsteps gradually became louder, and Leonard and a police officer came up. The police officer smelled the stench, and his face changed slightly. He immediately cooperated with the colleagues in the Special Operations Department to knock on the door of the residence on the 2nd floor and roughly asked about the situation on the 3rd floor. Moments later, wearing a silver V epaulets, he looked at the dead body in the rocking chair and said, Katie Stefana Bieber, aged between 55 and 60, is a widow and has lived here with her son Riel Bieber for more than 10 years. Her husband was a jeweler before his death. Her son is about 30 years old and has no wife. He inherited his father's business with a weekly salary of about £1 and 15 souls. According to their neighbors, they haven't met them for more than a week. Described here, Klein already knows where the next focus is. Missing, or more precisely, I don't know where to go, Riel Bieber. That old note is probably on him. Do you have a picture of Riel Bieber? Dunn looked at the policeman. He played a senior inspector, however, this can't be called pretending because according to the police file, he is indeed a senior inspector, and his salary and allowance are based on this, of course, excluding the church part. Police officers slightly nervously shake head away. I don't know. I have to go back to the branch office to look for it. Normally, we can't leave photos for everyone. I see. You continue to ask the residents on the 1st floor and ask in detail. Dunn gave the order. Looking at the police officer, he closed the door and turned to the old Neil way. I'll leave it to you next, or I'll let the residents here sleep peacefully and look for the appearance of Riel Bieber from their dreams. Well, I don't trust the drawing done by dictation very much. Old Neil nodded, took out a few thumb-sized bottles from the waist pocket of the black classical robe, and spilled the liquid around in a certain order. Then, he twisted out a handful of powder and sprinkled it around himself. Strange, pungent smell transpiration, not affected by the stench in the room, and Klein suddenly felt that old Neil had an invisible power around him, the power to separate him from the environment, from himself and others, just like the state before this house. To old Neil half closed his eyes, his mouth moved, and he read a low and vague mantra. Klein was not ready, only vaguely heard, I pray for the power of the goddess, and I look forward to the care of the night. Who? The sudden blowing wind went through the window and blew up the powder. Klein's heart suddenly shook, and all the bumps on his skin stood out, only to feel that some indescribable, dare not look straight, extremely horrible smell quickly spread. His head is confused and tense, just like the state after doing a set of difficult math problems. Suddenly, old Neil's eyes opened, and his eyes were dark. He took a water-absorbing pen out of his pocket, brushed the waste paper on the table, and drew it so fast that his whole body trembled. Klein gazed intently, only to see a face with Zhongshen's eye socket and high nose bridge quickly emerged. Wait until the natural volume of short hair is completed, and old Neil wrote a line of words at the bottom of the portrait. Black hair, dark blue eyes, and an ulceramic denture on the left side of my mouth. Pop. Old Neil's pen fell on the paper, and his body twitched a few times. This is what remains of Riel Bieber in the room. Old Neil, whose eyes' color soon returned to normal, whispered something. Then he returned to his previous position and slowly turned around in the same place. The invisible and spaced force suddenly dissipated and turned into a breeze. Praise the goddess. Old Neil clicked 4 times on his chest, making up the shape of a crimson moon. Klein's spirit relaxed and observed more carefully, and found that Riel Bieber's facial features were nothing special, and his temperament was quite peaceful, except that the decrees on both sides of his nose were obviously drooping. I'll see if I can find things with a stick. He picked up the portrait, rummaged through the men's clothes in the bedroom, and spread them all on the floor. Done. Leonard and Old Neil didn't stop him, watching him stick a silver-inlaid black cane on clothes and portraits. Fry, the body receiver, was as silent as ever. Brown to black, Klein eyes deep and remote to complete meditation. Loosen the palm of your hand. The black cane stood quietly, as if it were inserted into the floor, the position of Riel Bieber. Klein mused again in his heart. In the howling wind, the cane fell, but in the process of falling, it changed its direction all the time and finally turned into a small rotation around the fulcrum. Without the help of any external force, this silver-inlaid black cane has regained its footing. Klein tried several times, all with the same ending, and only shook his head at Dunn and Old Neil. There are strange forces that interfere with their divination. Dunn took off the black gloves and said to Leonard and Klein, "You take the portrait of Riel Bieber to ask the residents here, make the final confirmation, and then arrest him for murdering his mother." Okay. Klein grabbed his cane and bent down to pick up the portrait. When the neighbors confirmed that the portrait was really Riel Bieber, Dunn asked Leonard and police officers to go to the police station to complete the formalities, while himself and Fry went to several bars in Tingen to find someone through underground channels. Klein and Old Neil returned to Blackthorn Security Company by coach. At this time, it was less than 8 o'clock, and Luo Shan had not yet arrived. Closed the door. Klein sighed head to look at the Old Neil, half confused and half asked, "Why did I sent the notes of the Antigonus family to Riel Bieber's house. This is completely different from Welch's residence to Iron Cross Street." Old Neil went to the sofa. Haha laughs. "This is not very obvious. You don't know if you touched the power in the note, or if you were curious to do some of the rituals it described, which provoked the strange existence that should not be provoked. The purpose of this power is to give the note to Riel Bieber and break all clues so that no one can find it. So, except for you, Welch and Naya committed suicide on the spot. Frankly speaking, I still don't understand why you survived." "I don't know." Klein sat down with a wry smile and replied, "I also thought of your guess about what happened, but I just don't understand why I have to give the notes to Riel Bieber." Old Neil stand handway. Maybe his birth spirit meets the requirements, or maybe he is the only descendant of the Antigonus family. In short, there are too many possibilities. Why the note was sold to our city of Tingen should have similar reasons. I think it's descendants. Klein suddenly sighed. It's a pity that I didn't notice it the first time. Riel Bieber and that note are gone. Old Neil smiled to say with smile, "This is a problem that Dunn needs to worry about, and it is a good thing for you." "Why do you say that?" Klein frowned doubtfully. Chapter 47. Old Neil, who is short of money. Old Neil rubbed his temples. "The reason why you committed suicide has probably been figured out, and the note has reached Riel Bieber's hand, and it has been exposed. Whether you are alive or dead, it is difficult to affect the subsequent development. I think the strange existence or mysterious power that caused all this will no longer pay special attention to you, just like you don't care about ants on the ground, as long as you don't try to remind him of you. And we wanted Riel Bieber will soon spread to the Priory. They should be able to guess that this is related to the whereabouts of the notes of the Antigone family. Believe me, these secret organizations that have survived for thousands of years must have various news channels. Therefore, their focus will turn to Riel Bieber's whereabouts, trying to find the notes before us, and they will not, and cannot, harass you, follow you, and deal with it again. Young man, congratulations, you've got rid of the shadow of the past, and are about to usher in a new journey full of sunshine." Klein nodded, delighted and relaxed, and said, "I hope so. The haze hanging over my head from crossing here seems to be really going away." However, frankly speaking, Klein is still a little uneasy, because there seems to be a certain degree of fetters between himself and the notebook, so that when doing normal hostage rescue tasks, he will find traces of residue by an unusual coincidence. He was really afraid that one day, the postman suddenly sent a parcel and opened it himself, only to find that it was the notebook of the Antigonus family. "I hope everything will develop as described by Old Neil." He prayed silently. Old Neil heard his answer and immediately laughed. "You don't seem to be a devout believer in the goddess. At this time, shouldn't you draw a red moon on your chest and say, 'May the goddess bless us'? Mr. Neil, you don't seem to be either. True believers don't say, 'Welcome to a new journey full of sunshine.'" After this period of occult course, Klein and Old Neil established a good friendship, so they sarcastically returned. Two people glances, tacit understanding smiled a few times. almost at the same time in the chest-ordered four-way. Appraise the goddess. At this moment, the rotating sound of picks and marbles sounded, and the door of Blackthorn Security Company was opened, delicate and elegant. Mrs. Oriana rolled up her fashionable curly hair and walked lightly into the reception hall with a light green skirt. "Good morning, Mr. Neal." "Good morning, Klein." Holding a bag made of calf leather in her hand, she greeted with a smile. "Today is another sunny day, a good day." "Good morning, Ariana. You are still as beautiful as you were 10 years ago." Old Neal walked over and responded, Olivia eyes a horizontal face with a straight-face way. "Mr. Neal, your praise is still as irritating as it has been in the past 10 years. She stressed the words for more than 10 years. "Really?" Old Neal looked puzzled at Klein, his face full of doubts. "Don't mention anything that can remind a lady of her age." As a strong keyboard player who knows a little about everything, Klein instantly understood Mrs. Ariana's concern and said with a light smile, "Good morning, Mrs. Ariana. You are so beautiful every day." "Thank you, our excellent graduate of Hoey University." Leona smiled and nodded, then said, "That old housekeeper has already paid for the entrusted task. According to the captain's regulations, half of it belongs to extra funds, and the other half is for you and Leonard. As you are not a regular player, you can only get 10% of that half, and you can sign it later." "How much did he pay?" Klein asked happily and lovingly. £200, that's what he said at the time. "Lord, the storm is on. I really can't imagine it. I can't believe it. It's solved like this. This is no more difficult than having a dream. Why is your security company not famous? This is simply a shame for the whole industry." Mrs. Oriana imitated the southern accent of the old housekeeper Kelly. Klein seriously thought for a few seconds. Humor said, "This is actually unfair to those kidnappers." The two extraordinary people solved the problem quickly in a way that can be described as relaxed and comfortable. It's like an armed adult bullying several children. They are so unlucky. They must have lost the protection of the gods. Leona chuckled. "I told the old housekeeper that we were lucky enough to be entrusted this time, and it happened that the wire people saw the kidnappers with their children entering the hiding place, so don't expect too much from us. We are really just a very ordinary security company. Generally speaking, the more you emphasize the ordinary, the more unusual it is." Klein smiled and lamented, and watched Mrs. Oriana enter the accounting room through the partition. Old Neal snapped his lips beside him and said with implicit envy, "You are really a lucky guy. How long has it taken you to join us, and you will meet a commission worth £200. Is this rare?" Klein asked doubtfully. He was either studying history and mystery, or hanging out and looking for clues with inspiration. According to Ariana's statistics, we don't necessarily meet a commission once a week, and most of the commissions are worth less than £20. Old Neal rubbed the white crystal pendant on his wrist and replied with a sigh. Then he implicitly looked expectantly at Klein. "If you encounter similar entrustment in the future, please remember to inform me." Listening to the words of Old Neal, Klein suddenly felt a strange feeling, so he asked directly, "Mr. Neal, you seem to be short of money? How much salary can you get every week? If it is inconvenient to talk about it, please ignore my question." Old Neal leaned back on the back of the sofa. Haha laughs. "This is not something to hide. I have been here for many years. At present, I can get a salary from the church and the police department every week with a total value of £12. £12 a week? Klein blurted out in astonishment. A weekly salary of £12, 52 weeks a year. That's almost £600 a year. When I read the Tingen Morning Post and The Honest Man, it was said that a senior barrister only earns £800 to £1,000 a year. This is a senior barrister, and Benson, the manager of their import and export company, earns only £6 a week, which is quite a decent figure. Yes, this salary is actually rich enough, and we don't have to pay income tax." Old Neal added with a smile. Klein heard from his brother Benson that if he earns more than £1 a week, he needs to pay Class E tax, that is, the salary income tax of government and company employees, which is 3% for £1 to £2, 5% for £2 to £5, 10% for £5 to £10, 15% for £10 to £20, and 20% for more than £20. In addition, he also saw in the newspaper that there are 4 other income taxes. A is the land, housing, and other real value added. Profits tax, including land rent and rent. B is the agricultural income tax. C is the bond, fund, and stock profit tax. And D is the income tax of commercial, financial, and full-time industries. An admirable point. Klein echoed the words of Old Neal, but Old Neal shook his head. For us extraordinary people who need to explore secrets often, practice often, and try rituals, the salary is always not enough. Aren't all the materials applied for? Klein asked in surprise. Old Neal laughed at. There's a limit, sometimes, also must give enough justified reasons. If you want to practice more and try more in the mysterious field, you can only spend your own money to buy materials, which can be bought internally or go to some underground trading markets. Klein's spirit does it one brace up, immediately asked. Underground trading market with extraordinary materials? I thought the church would definitely not allow them to exist. I am lacking sufficient channels to obtain materials. You have a secret organization behind you, so you can't solve everything inside the Night Watchman, can you? This kind of thing can't be controlled at all. Well, in the occult point of view, everything is animistic and everything is homologous. The materials we use are not only from extraordinary species, but also from normal animals, plants, and minerals such as poison corydalus, mint, and night vanilla in your bottle of soothsayer potions, which are often encountered in daily life. They may not have extraordinary properties, but they all have their own characteristics, and they have been blended and blended. Old Neil explained a sentence in detail, but before Klein spoke, he continued, moreover, extraordinary species are not only useful at the core. Just like the Ravo octopus, except for blood, its eyes, its epidermis, and its tentacles are all good materials. Unless the church uses its own people to capture them, it will be a very big economic burden to completely hoard and control the outflow. The lower the extraordinary materials, the more special ones can only be kept from circulating. Old Neil suddenly smiled. Another important reason is that the underground trading market we know is better than what we don't know. Under the premise that the secret organization has not been completely eliminated, this is a good strategy, and it can also help us obtain the materials in short supply. Of course, after such a market exists, there will definitely be contraband. As long as it is not too exaggerated and too dangerous, we all pretend not to see it and use them to enrich our treasure house at most. There are still several major churches that contain each other and cannot adopt too drastic measures. Klein speculated. Old Neil, and didn't make a concrete expansion. I'm a diviner, and I definitely need to practice again and again in the future. I need more materials. Mr. Neil, can you take me to those underground trading markets? Klein asked for a legitimate reason that Old Neil revealed a difficult expression. In fact, most of the guys who are active in those places are not extraordinary. Some are nobles who like mystery, and some are rich people who yearn for it. Well, I have a 30-pound bill due soon, so I can't go there for the time being. Well, Klein had no idea that it was the reason why he owed money. After a while, he said, Mr. Neil, do you need to borrow money? I have a reward of 10 pounds. Haha, no need. I have a solution. Old Neil patted the sofa and stood up slowly, saying, Hey, old age is really the most formidable enemy of biology. Last night's night shift made me very tired. Well, this morning you review your previous lessons and read more literature. Tomorrow, I will start teaching you the basics of ritual magic. Okay. Klein followed up and took off his hat. In the afternoon, seeing that Captain Dunn hadn't come back, Klein pretended that he was still looking for the note and wandered the street again. With a reward of 10 pounds, he can go directly to the Divination Club without waiting for the allocation of funds. Meditation, whispers, and visions that appear from time to time in second sight make him eager to start acting. P.S. It's Monday again, and there will be a watch at 12 o'clock tonight. Chapter 48. Heiners Vincent. The first more recommended votes. The Divination Club on the second floor, number 13 Hull Street, North District of Tingen City. Klein once again saw the beautiful lady in charge of reception. She still wears long brown hair and looks mature and elegant. It is difficult to judge her specific age only from her appearance. Hello, Mr. Gracis is not here today. Do you want to change to a fortune teller? The beautiful lady said with a smile. Hearing these words, Klein, who just took off his silk hat and put it back on, was suddenly surprised. Do you remember me? This was 5 days ago. Brown hair lady, she chuckled laugh. You are the first guest to ask Mr. Gracis for divination, and you are the only one so far. It is hard for me not to leave a deep impression. The impression that you are greedy and cheap, and you suffer big losses? Klein vomited a self, thoughtfully, and asked, When was the last time Mr. Gracis came to the club? Brown-haired lady glanced at him, as if thinking to answer. To be honest, we can't grasp the law of members coming. They have free will, and all kinds of affairs. Well, I remember that after that day, Mr. Gracis should never come to the club again. Good luck to him. May the goddess bless him. Klein prayed, didn't ask more, and then laughed. I'm not here for divination this time. I want to join the club. Really? This is our pleasure. Miss Brown-haired showed a look of surprise at the right time. For the first time, please pay an annual fee of 5 pounds, and then 1 pound a year. I don't need to reintroduce the details, do I? Klein took out a new 5-pound note from his inner pocket and looked at Henry Augustus' eyes head away from him, carefully checked the anti-counterfeiting watermark. Brown-haired lady solemnly put away the money, took out a form and handed it to Klein. Please fill in the details, and I'll give you a receipt. Do you have a receipt? Looking up is Blackthorn Security Company. Klein was amused by his own idea, picked up the fountain pen on the desk, filled in the information such as name, age, street, and company name with blue and black ink. However, he deliberately left out the date of birth. For a soothsayer, this is a spiritual number related to his own mystery, Open the receipt credentials. After registering the membership, Ms. Brownhair stretched out her right hand and said, "Welcome to join the Divination Club in Tingen. I'm Angelica Barhart, your diligent server. This is your member sleeve nail with our unique inscription on it, which can prove your membership." "Hello, Ms. Angelica." Klein gently shook each other's palms and accepted the dark gold sleeve nail. He found that the unique inscription on it used the root of a word in Hermes, and that word was soothsayer. Angelica withdrew her left hand and thought for a few seconds. "I don't know what divination you are good at, or what divination methods you want to learn in the club. We will consider inviting the corresponding well-known diviners to teach, and we will also introduce you to members who are similar in expertise, so that you can communicate happily. I know a little about every kind of divination, so I don't need special consideration." Klein replied with a little modification and asked, "Can I do divination for others now? I am not a novice who just started learning." He is here to play a diviner, not to learn divination methods that ordinary people can access. Angelica kept a polite smile way. "You are free to help people with divination in the club at any time, but we won't put in a good word for you when the customer asks before confirming your level. What is your expected divination fee?" 2 pence. Klein intends to win by price when he is not famous. We will draw a quarter of a penny according to the standard of 1/8 of the total price. Angelica said all the regulations first, and then wrote Klein's information into the Soothsayer album for customers to choose. After all this, she smiled and pointed to the conference room at the end of the corridor. "Mr. Heiners Vincent is explaining astrolabe divination. You can sit quietly or raise your hand to ask questions." "Okay." Klein walked to the conference room with great interest, wanting to hear the difference between Heiners Vincent and old Neild. At this time, Angelica catch up, low voice way. "Mr. Moridi, do you want coffee or tea? We offer Zai black tea, Southwell coffee, and Dixie coffee for free." Klein, who often reads newspapers recently, knows that these coffees and black teas belong to the lower middle level, but he also knows that they are definitely better than the inferior products at home, so he wanted to think. A cup of Southwell coffee, 3 spoonfuls of sugar, no milk. The most famous beer and red wine in Southwell County, the Kingdom of Rouen, are quite liked by many great people, while coffee is relatively unknown. "Okay, I'll bring it to you later." Angelica pointed to the conference room. Klein slowly came to the door of the half-mask and heard the explanation with a strong Joni Ahotile County accent and said, "Astrolabe divination is also a very complicated one in all divination. This is only relative to ordinary people." Klein silently added for each other and saw 5 or 6 long tables in the conference room in a semicircle, surrounded by a middle-aged man in a black classical robe. Heiners Vincent. This gentleman has obvious dark circles, thick and stiff brown hair, and they stand stubbornly one by one, just like playing hedgehog. In addition, he has no obvious characteristics in explaining astrolabe divination. "See Klein come in." Heiners Vincent nodded slightly, without interrupting the course. "Just a little slower." Klein put his pocket in one hand and a walking stick in the other. As he found a marginal position to sit down, he leaned back comfortably and looked around in the still bright sunshine in the afternoon. He saw 6 members here, 4 men and 2 women. Some of them concentrate on taking notes, some communicate something in a low voice, and some give Klein a wry smile. "Put away the cane." Klein pressed the half-height silk hat, folded his fingers and tapped twice between the eyebrows. His eyes to Heiners saw each other's aura, saw the different colors, brightness and thickness. Dark red, a little anxious emotionally. "Other parts are healthy, but there is something wrong there. I don't know what it is." Klein listened to the class leisurely and silently. At this time, his right hand became a fist, and he resisted his mouth to prevent the laughter from leaking out, because he suddenly felt like an unlicensed old Chinese doctor. For second sight this ability, he is quite satisfied now, although can only judge the general situation, unable to distinguish the specific details, but also enough to get a lot of useful information. Looking around again, he tapped the eyebrows twice again, as if thinking about Heiners's words just now. "Astrology is a kind of astrology, but ordinary people can also try to interpret it. For example, the most basic birth astrolabe is to mark their symbols in the correct place on the astrolabe according to the positions of the sun, the moon, the blue star and the red star when the questioner was born, and attach the corresponding conditions of various constellations, so as to finally interpret each other's fate. This requires the soothsayers to know how to calculate the states of planets and constellations backwards, which is quite complicated. Of course, some people publish reference books for people to inquire about, while others simplify them directly and only use constellations to make the most vague interpretation." Klein listened quietly, without interrupting or asking questions. From time to time, he rubbed the citron pendant in his cuff and took a sip of Southwell coffee from Angelica. After a long time, Heiners rubbed his eyebrows way. "You may need to try to draw your own astrolabe. If you have any questions, you can come to me. I am in the white crystal room." After watching him leave, a young man with a white shirt and a black vest got up with a smile and walked beside Klein. "Hello, I'm Edward Steve." "Hello, Klein Moridi." Klein got up and reciprocated. The astrolabe is so complicated that every time I hear it, I can't help but want to start a dream. Edward Steve laughed at himself. Klein smiled laugh. This is because Mr. Vincent can't help but teach us all the knowledge he has, just like giving us an indie dinner at once, which is too bad for digestion. If it were me, I could finish a big indie dinner. They always put a little food on a big plate. Edward haha smiled and sat down, curious, and asked, "Are you a new member? I haven't seen you for 2 years. I just joined the club today." Klein answered frankly, "What are you good at?" "I am best at tarot and poker divination." Edward asked casually. "I know a little, and I only know a little." Klein used his previous description of himself here. He is not modest, because in the field of divination, there are really too many mysterious knowledge that he has not mastered. Just when other members wanted to come and exchange astrolabe divination, Angelica walked into the conference room. "Mr. Steve, someone is looking for your divination." "Okay." Edward Steve smiled and got up. "It seems that you are an excellent soothsayer." Klein looked at each other. "No, it's just because my price is the best." Edward chuckled. Ordinary people will never choose the most expensive ones directly when they come to divination, and unless they have been kicked in the head by a donkey, they will certainly not be relieved of the cheapest ones. The ones with the price in the middle are the easiest to get opportunities. "I was kicked in the head by a donkey, as you said." Seeing each other leave, Klein suddenly shook his head with a wry smile. "There seems to be a problem with your price positioning." He stood up, took his cane, walked out of the meeting room, and found Angelica again. "I want to change the divination price. 8 pence. Angelica gave him a deep look. "We will meet your requirements, but we will also tell customers that you have just joined our club." "No problem." Klein doesn't mind nodding. Sometimes, mystery is also an important element for soothsayers to attract customers. Change the information. Klein just visible to the conference room. At this moment, he saw Heiners Vincent coming out of the white crystal room with a silver-plated mirror in his hand. The famous soothsayer said to the 3 men, 2 women, and 5 members in the conference room, "I have just mastered a new divination. Magic mirror divination. Do you want to learn?" Magic mirror divination. This is not a safe divination method. Klein, dressed in a black suit, stopped outside the conference room and frowned. "P.S. For 7, the first watch, please recommend votes. Chapter 49 Divination. Second, more recommended votes." As a diviner who has just entered the door of mysticism, Klein dare not say that he knows a lot, but he certainly knows a lot more than ordinary people, and knows that various divination can be divided into 3 categories according to a certain standard, and this standard is the source of enlightenment. The first divination method includes tarot, poker, pendulum, divination stick and dream, etc. With the help of the enlightenment obtained by the communication between the questioner and the spiritual world, the result of divination is interpreted, but the pendulum and divination stick method have high requirements on spirituality, mental body, and spirit body. Not that the extraordinary can't get accurate and obvious enlightenment. While the card divination uses the idea of providing fixed symbol elements in advance to make ordinary people, the second method of divination includes psychic number, astrology, and all types derived from them. The diviner calculates, speculates, and interprets the corresponding results by asking the objective information provided by people or natural changes, and the initiative is not in asking people, but in the diviner. The third method of divination is to use the power of a third party other than the diviner and the questioner. The disc fairy and the pen fairy that Klein knew in his last life belong to this category. Through a certain ceremony, he asks for an unknown and mysterious existence to give an answer directly. Although the average person may not succeed, it will often lead to tragedy if there is 1,000, and the communication is full of malice, or the mere contact will make people collapse. The magic mirror divination mentioned by Heiners Vincent just now belongs to this method in mysticism. The mirror is the gateway to the unknown, the strangeness, and the spiritual world. So Klein stopped outside the conference room, intending to listen to what the famous diviner would say to decide whether to inform the captain and copy the other party's gas meter in the middle of the night. Of course, there is also a safe way to magic mirror divination. That is, to pray for answers from 7 orthodox gods. Even if it is difficult for ordinary people to get real enlightenment, at least there will be no danger and sequelae. The kind of magic mirror divination that is strictly controlled by night watchman, penalty taker, etc. is to ask for the help of evil gods or mysterious beings that some organizations believe in. In addition, it is not good to make it up at will. Maybe a word or a certain trait will attract unknown attention. In this world with extraordinary power, similar divination will always lead to extremely bad results. Klein even suspects that the original owner, Welch and Naya, made a similar black divination, according to the notes of the Antigone family. At this time, Heiners also explained the principle of magic mirror divination to 5 members and began to describe the specific process. First of all, according to their own belief in the gods, choose the right date and time, which can be decided by the astrology manual. For example, as we all know, Sunday is a symbol of the goddess of the night, which is the embodiment of rest, while from 2 a.m. to 3 a.m., from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m., and from 11 p.m. to 0 p.m., it is dominated by the goddess of the night when it is the moon. So the soothsayers who believe in the goddess of the night, the foundation is very solid. Klein nodded slightly with the help of the half-open door of the conference room. It must be said that under the condition of checks and balances among the 7 churches, some mysterious knowledge has indeed leaked out. For example, the astrology manual provides many symbolic meanings, but ordinary people can hardly get the desired effect without magic medicine and extraordinary power. Secondly, we carefully clean the mirror. It must be a silver-plated mirror, and put it at home to symbolize the position of the moon. Heiners demonstrated with props in his hand. No, what is needed at this time is the pendulum method. First, choose a position. Say, this is suitable for magic mirror divination in your mind for 7 times, and then look at the direction in which the pendant rotates. Clockwise is correct, counterclockwise is wrong. Of course, if you pray for a malicious, unknown, and mysterious existence, the position is not the key, but whether he is interested or not is the key. Klein corrected silently. At this time, he had the feeling that he was a teacher. Heiners Vincent couldn't hear Klein's heart, and his tone was normal, and he said it again in detail. When the members wrote their notes, he continued to explain. After bathing, make sure all the curtains are drawn, and the door is locked and closed. Then, light a candle, put it in front of the mirror, and sincerely pray to the gods you believe in. The problem should be as simple as possible, and don't use complicated decoration. After praying for 7 times, pick up your mirror and drop it lightly on the ground, which must be very light. Remember the broken appearance. This is the inspiration given by the gods. I will specifically talk about several main symbols but few. This is orthodox magic mirror divination. Klein, relieved, slowly walked into the conference room, sat in the previous position, and drank the remaining Southwell coffee in one gulp. The so-called orthodoxy means that you can really get enlightenment, but you can't really interpret it when the extraordinary person gets a response at this step. He can see a certain picture directly from the mirror and get clearer information. Heiners talked for a long time because there were many symbols formed after being broken. Until Edward Steve finished divination and returned to the conference room, he had not finished. Klein didn't ask Edward what he helped people divine and what method he used. This is an unwritten rule among diviners, and he, who plays the role of diviner, must strictly abide by it unless the other party takes the initiative to mention it. I found that many times, our interpretation is too vague, and it seems to cater to different needs, so that different people can find their own descriptions from the interpretation. Edward took a sip of Zai black tea and sighed in a low voice. For example, there are many twists and turns and too many hardships, but eventually you will see the dawn. No one knows when the dawn will come. For example, your trip is not very smooth, but you will definitely arrive alive. Hey, the dead won't come to refute me. Because he didn't listen from the beginning, he ignored Heiners's magic mirror divination course, survivor bias. Klein added with a smile, the general meaning of survivor bias is that many statistics often only come from the living and surviving people, ignoring the dead, and the results will be obviously biased. Yes, Roselle the Great was really a philosopher. Edward exclaimed,